Joining us now to talk more about Washington, D.C. and how the National Cattlemen's Beef Association works there on behalf of its members is Kendall Frazier, the interim CEO of NCBA. Kendall, let's talk policy for a moment, and I'd just like your perspective on what NCBA does in Washington, D.C. to protect and defend the beef cattle industry at large and specifically NCBA members.
We have a staff in Washington, D.C. and an office in Washington, D.C. that is working every day with Congress and with the governmental agencies to protect the interest of cattlemen. So we are the voice of the cattle industry in Washington, D.C. And it's extremely important because what the federal government does on a daily basis impacts our business.
We've had lots of examples of that, and I guess I would ask for you to reflect on your, more than 30 years with NCBA. How have those pressures changed over that period of time in terms of the impact on cattle producers?
Well, they've intensified. The role and interference of the government, the federal government, in our business has intensified over time, Kevin, and it's changed dramatically. For example, EPA came into being in the 1960s and 70s. And so we had no EPA. Amazing. Now we have an EPA that we have to deal with every day that's trying to regulate water, air, dust. So that's just one change. So over time, we've seen regulatory pressures on our industry that make it harder for our people to do business.
Constantly ratchet up over time.
Yeah, it ratchets it up over time, and it increases the cost of doing business in our industry.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the recent wins NCBA has had in Washington, D.C.
Well, a couple I can think of. We're just successful in getting mandatory price reporting extended through legislation in the House and Senate. And that is important to cattlemen because it provides for a very transparent market. So that's extremely important. The other thing that we're working on right now is to stop the implementation of the WOTUS rule by EPA, and we're involved in legal actions to stop that. So far, it's been stopped in several states, but we're going to continue to fight that because we think that's a bad idea. It will bring more regulatory pressure on cattlemen. It'll regulate waters around the country on land that were never intended to be regulated by EPA.
And let's talk about the Sagegrouse, something that a lot of us out west have been talking about the last couple of years. Give us an update on the Sagegrouse and the endangered species list.
Well, the Department of Interior just announced that they would not list the Sagegrouse as an endangered species. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the federal government is going to implement some land use plans that will restrict what cattlemen do on public lands and restrict private property rights. So it's a mixed bag, Kevin.
A real mixed bag. We spent a lot of time on this show talking about exports and trade, specifically as it relates to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Do you think we can get that deal done?
I do. We're very close. There are just a few outstanding issues to be resolved. And why that's important, that trade agreement between several countries in Asia and around the world, is it will lower tariffs in the Japanese market. And the Japanese market is extremely important for U.S. beef exports. So I'm optimistic. I think we're going to get it finally done, and it's something we've been really pushing for to get done.
It's outstanding news. And one last question. I hear there is are some plans in place to actually expand NCBA's presence in Washington, D.C. Can you tell us more about that?
We're going to do that in our next fiscal year, Kevin. We're going to add additional staff in the trade access area and environmental area in our Washington, D.C. office. We're going to add additional resources for working in Washington, D.C. And that will help combat this flood of regulatory activity and protect cattlemen longer term.
Kendall, thank you so much for applying your 30 years of experience in leading our organization. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Kevin.
If you'd like to help in the fight to protect the way of life for cattlemen and women, why not join NCBA? Just call 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website, that's beefusa.org.